Well, one can reason that each side to an argument is arguing because it feels it's in the right. If we take the racist thing, then if I let these people into this country, our society is going to be ruined. It's the view of the racist, basically. We will be very negatively affected. The side of the non-racist is they should be here, they're desperate in their plight, and we want to rescue them. If we think of the abortion thing, one side, the family's life is going to be ruined by this child, going to be so handicapped perhaps. Therefore it's best to terminate the pregnancy. The other side might be arguing, well, you don't know that for sure, and the child's life is as big a right as anyone else's. Or perhaps their view is a religious one, that God has said you can't kill, and this constitutes killing. There are some people who are undecided. There are others that feel that legislation and the effect of legislation, the intention and the result, are not always the same thing. And if you allow abortion, you open a situation to abortion where even the parents don't want it, and the medical profession is insisting on it taking place. We don't want to risk going down that road. We can't always control. In the future, it's uncertain as to whether we can control our medical profession to make the decision that we think is right and value. With the racist issue, we might well think that, well, yes, we would like to let some in that are really being persecuted, but there are limits, and this is the limit I want to make. You know, you might even be specifying, in some sense, numbers per year. And you might be rather more pressing about what to do with illegal entry. Well, we have thought democracy comes to the rescue. The majority have their way. Well, it rescues from the point of view of the majority, but not from the minority that was overruled. Yes, pragmatically, you have an outcome, a solution. But this outcome and solution upon many issues does amount to perhaps all of the population being very disgruntled on certain issues in which they found they were a minority, and their views were, if you like, not respected in the decision. And what I mean by this is then to dispel this notion that a democratic solution of majority rule doesn't mean a happy solution. It can mean a very cynical, disgruntled population where conceivably, definitely a majority of its citizens are very disgruntled about a key issue in which they found they were a minority. You see, we are not just left and right, which would simplify things if it were the case. Or should I say, we're not simply left or right. We are human. We are much greater in variety than this, on many dimensions. And the ones in which we're aggrieved about may well be majoring with us. I think I'm arguing that we have hoped that democracy is our solution to people being discontent. It's not. What we need to do is know how to manage discontent. Whether I mean by that on the grand scale, society-wise and policy, or whether I mean individually, in how do you react to being in a minority on certain issues. If they become more important to you than your contentment at the policies that have gone your way, then you will be discontent. And in fact, our political system may well flame discontent by political campaigning, deliberately highlighting issues that may be of discontent and cause you to vote accordingly. In other words, pure democracy is not all happy days. In fact, it's probably something that you see overall casually looking at YouTube, as opposed to the daily news as farmed out by the media. Well, if I haven't come up with a sociological or political solution, is there a psychological stroke religious solution? Well, yes, there's an individualism that recognizes if I don't keep the law, I get clouted. But where the law allows me a freedom, I can exercise it. Now, from my particular godly perspective, as I take it to be, you might not find it very godly, but I understand that, I think. I would say, well, this is the menu that God has given me. I'm not fighting against it. I'm not, calling for the revolution, because the revolution, in my casual observation, can bring more harm than good and a very uncertain outcome. If I'm allowed to object verbally, then I will, and if I'm not allowed to object verbally, well, I won't. Because my objection won't be heard, I'll simply be locked up, suppressed, and so forth. I become, you might say, more of an observer, but not entirely. Where I'm free to act, I act. And where I'm not free to act, I recognize I'm not free to act. My God is not upset by my not trying to walk through brick walls. Only disappointed, perhaps, a little, where I choose and have a choice, but choose wrongly. And even then, he's a good dad. He says, well, they're children, and they're here to learn. Bless them. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Well, that's all very well, Marshall, if you have your religious view, but what about the others? Those that don't have quite your religious view, but a different one. And those that don't have a religious view at all, and have their view. Well, I think there'll be the turmoil that we have. Accept that the world is a mix of good and evil. And can only hope that I choose the good where it's available. Where it's not available, or where there are impossible choices, I probably make, bad, even random outcomes. We're only here to do the feasible. But I don't want to dismiss a person's view on something like racism or abortion simply because they don't have my values. I would like them to have my values, but I don't gain anything by forcing it down their throat. I trust that living in this world will, in the long run, put their values right. But I do agree it can be a very long run, and from my perspective, well, cause a lot of suffering in the meantime. Is some suffering here inevitable? Possibly, yes. But I certainly hope it can be minimized by kindly advice when they have ears to hear, observation of good and evil when they have eyes to see, consequences of different approaches and values and policies, and bitter experience when they receive neither. And I agree, that's very sad. But quite simply, nobody wants others to suffer unnecessarily. That's really all one can say. And I know that's not very precise, and it's hardly a perfect outcome, but this is a classroom. And from my it's a classroom from my perspective, of course. From a secular point of view, it's all there is. And they're desperately trying to achieve what they feel all that can be. Should I not say desperately, but earnestly, in some sense. Well, of course, you realize that I'm weighing the eternal against the transitory, and the eternal wins every time for me, because the eternal, cumulatively, is more important than the transitory. I'm not at all clear in my childish state that I can put the eternal always first. Sometimes the transitory desires and needs seem paramount, and I take that path. Perhaps because it's built in us to have a self-preservation. Else, as children, we might not survive long enough to have a long enough education here. We don't want to keep coming back, do we? Thank you, Heavenly Dad.